have three pretty unique, some people would refer to them as decorative plaques. This one is done in the Egyptian style. It is on a solid sheet of copper. It is pretty old, but it's still going to be a reproduction. I'm positive that this one is. Nonetheless, it is a reproduction of original Egyptian iconography and hieroglyph. I've got two other ones I'll show you briefly and then kind of talk about what we're going to look into here. Take a look at this. Some of you know that we did have an antique store here at this building where I got the woodworking workshop going on. Well, over the course of these years that we've had the antique store, I have purchased certain things that I liked and certain things that I thought had merit for things that I was interested in. Well, needless to say, these bad boys right here are definitely something to see. I've got the larger one here. I'll show you in its full detail sooner or later. And then I've got the small one. Now, these are pretty old, and they are hand done. They're not printed out in a machine or any factory or a mold or anything like that. These are all hand done, and you could tell just by simply looking at the major unevenness of the design work as it goes around the outside. Okay, absolutely hand done, every bit of it. Yeah, these are pretty old. Now, I don't know how old, and I'm definitely aware that people age things to make them appear old to hope to sell them for more money. Regardless, if they are reproductions, they are reproductions of original works, and these original works just so happen to depict, in my opinion, some very well-known ancient events, ancient mythology, if you would. We're going to make connections here to Gilgamesh, Samson, and Ezekiel chapter 19. Believe it or not. Remember what we were reading from chapter 17 to chapter 23 in the book of Ezekiel. Parable of the Great Eagle. And then in 19 we started, we might not have shown this image, but we've shown it before. It goes with chapter 19. There's Israel's mother, that lioness, that is teaching those two young lions' whelps to hunt. Now that's Ishtar. Notice she's got the Shen ring. Okay? Notice there's the Shen ring. Alright? And something else to notice. Their facial features. These are what most people would consider Proto-Aryan, maybe. Nonetheless, some very important things are going to develop out of all this that, believe it or not, are going to go with the scriptures from Ezekiel in an incredible sort of way. So hopefully we'll be able to get through and talk about these right here. You got to start thinking about Samson in Judges chapter 14 rendering that lion, destroying that lion. Gilgamesh, famous for destroying lions. Hercules, famous for destroying lions. These ancient, mighty heroes, famous for destroying lions. Well, as I told you, the lions that they're destroying is their other Nephilim ancestry, portions of the Nephilim descendancy that was not fallen, that did not adhere to the fallen propaganda, They were not going forward into the plan and the agenda of the fallen prince of this world. And they were maintaining their allegiance with the angels that did not rebel and the spirit factions of high spirit sons that were leading the resistance against this rebellion. You should understand that because we can produce the scripture that will clarify that a lot better out of the book of Enoch, which is important to understand. We're going to see how important as we move forward. But in the book of Enoch, it says that they shall be excited against each other, that they would kill each other amongst mutual slaughter, meaning they would destroy themselves throughout the generational descendancies, that they would destroy themselves. Something was going to excite them against each other, meaning the Nephilim factions. This, my friend, is where the real understanding of this red and this blue comes into play. And what is really being united here. What really is being united, and it's the fulfillment of truly who is trying to take over the dominion of this world. It's just incredible. But we'll get into that. It's going to explain how all of these megalithic cyclopean stone builders, have you ever wondered why they seemingly show up out of nowhere, persist for some time, long enough to build the structures, and then seemingly disappear without a trace? Some people would say cataclysm, some people would say pestilence, some people would say marauding invaders, cometary impacts. But you always have to remember what was spoken of in the ancient scriptures concerning prophecy with the descendants that would be known as the Nephilim. And we would go back to Genesis, where we're going to do shortly here, and we're going to remember that Cain was going to be considered a vagabond, a wanderer, a nomad in the earth, and that everyone that found him would want to slay him. Now let's talk about his generational descendancy from that point forward. Okay, the remnant, I guess I would say the growing tribe of Cain as it grows outward from that point in Nod. Well, that's exactly what would fulfill in the book of Enoch with the Nephilim descendancy as well. That it says that they would be excited against each other for mutual slaughter. And then as we see with this business about those finding Cain, that they would want to destroy him. And we know the mark was put upon him, least any destroyed him. Vengeance would then be taken against them who destroyed Cain on Cain's behalf. And that's what's going to be important here in just a moment. It fits, guys. And we're going to see how well it fits as we move forward. But it's going to fit with the disappearance and the even sudden emergence of these stone city builders. How will, and it's not just me that's done this, many people have done this, how we'll easily be able to link this up to this tribe of Cain that is in essence of Nephilim origin via the land of Nod. And that woman, of course, that was taken there to produce Enoch. And then we know from Enoch, we eventually get Enochian magic, if you will. So from Enoch, we go to Tubal-Cain, the first city builder. We get the plowshare. This agricultural situation. Then with agriculture, we enter into the agricultural calendar. We get into this idea of the harvest. And then we'll get into these, in essence, these time machines like Stonehenge, these particular mounds and hinges that cover the British Isles and certain portions of England. I mean, literally thousands of these things that can be attributed with the correct assessment and plotting of the movement of the wandering of Cain. Okay, so we're going to have to come back to these, but notice the Aryan features. Notice the very peculiar backpacks on these individuals. I would simply call these rocket men. Notice that the king here does have some sort of feathered appendages on him that is basically what we would see here flared out. But in this instance, because the individuals are close to him, we see that his feathers are tight. It's worth noticing here, if I don't mention it again, that the lion that's being depicted, the stylized looking creature like a lion, has wings. And then, of course, the hint, at least in my mind, to flight by these fellas right here, especially with the wings here, would fulfill nicely. And I'm just going to have to show it so that possibly as we move forward, I don't forget. Retain what I said there about Cain, because we're going to come right back into it. This was chapter 19, the book of Ezekiel. You should be familiar if you've been following the series Mirror, Mirror. What is thy mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions. She nourished her whelps among young lions. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion. All right, very important. And it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. So we see, in essence, it's going to recite 2 young lions that were manipulated by this particular mother passing herself off as a lioness. And that would be Ishtar. Not too hard to see there. That is the archaeological fulfillment of those scriptures there. And we know it well if you've been following this channel. So we're going to see a very, we're seeing the subordinated lions right here that are being shown to us. Now what's important, we see that the first one, the earlier one, is basically sealed. Nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains into the land of Egypt. This is what we want to see. We need to make this connection with this timing here, with this Cain and Abel business in the garden. It's going to be important, because at the same time we do that, we're going to go into the book of Enoch as it describes the sealing period for these fallen sons of God who have laid with women and then born their children, who have then further laid with portions of mankind as well. And then we see that they're all being recited as being sealed for 70 generations. That's from the book of Enoch. Well, we're going to be able to make that comparison with the beginning of Genesis with Cain as well. With this particular vengeance of Cain, something's going to happen to these people and their descendants who have killed, in essence, Cain, as it's described. And it's going to take place after 70 generations. Well, we understand what the key was for finding that time period. We'll look into it a little bit here. But nonetheless, it's going to be important, because when we get into them being sealed in the book of Enoch, it starts talking about them sharp hurled stones that are thrown over top of them. Well, that would be the pyramids of Giza. And that's what this one plaque I showed you in the Egyptian style is going to become very important. So do your best to retain that. There's a lot of things that are being talked about at once, because this literally talks about these things all at once, everything I'm showing you. So we know that he's being taught to catch the prey. That would be consistent here. Okay? And you're thinking to yourself, well, this is a man that's being shown catching a lion. Okay? Well, I'm really telling you that this is a lion that is being recited in the narrative as a stylized lion. But these are really like men. They're Nephilim descendancies that are being symbolized as lions. They're being symbolized as creatures, because they're more than the average man. They're mighty, and this lion symbolism suits them well. So you would imagine, in essence, 2 men, but the men are going to represent an entire generational descendancy, maybe even a few generational descendancies of each lion. But then, just to best sum it up and condense it for the symbol, that's what symbols do best. We see that it has been basically broken down into two age periods, where one lion represents the older ages, and then the next lion, the younger lion, represents the more previous, or the more modern ages. Okay, so this is where we get the talking about the two women, the daughter Samaria, who is the more ancient, and then we get the daughter Jerusalem, who is the more contemporary. Same thing here with the two lions. Okay, now as you see here, after the first lion is basically been sealed by these particular nations, well, we still have yet to show you who these nations are in the book of Enoch. And as I said, it's going to reveal the great antiquity of this. It's going to take it out of the context of the Old Testament timing period, if you will, and then push it back to the great antiquity period of the Garden of Eden. All right? So we'll just have to get to that. So as we get to this second lion that she took, and that would be verse 5, there's the second lion, and we see here the key that we're looking for. And he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion and learned to catch the prey and devoured men. You see that? That's what I'm trying to convey here. Look. He goes up and down. Where do you think they're going up and down to? Well, you should understand that there are outposts, if you know anything about the Anunnaki epics, that you should understand that the Anunnaki are really the sons of God that are spoken about in the Bible. And we find better portions of intact history within the Sumerian epics that speak about them. Nonetheless, the Urantia book as well speaks about them. And we will find out that consistently between the Urantia book and the Sumerian tablets themselves, the Sumerian histories record that the Anunnaki appeared here at about 450,000 years ago. 450,000 years ago is when they first appeared. Sometime between their appearance until about 200,000 years back from now, at about the 255,000 year marker, they rebelled. Not all of them. So as I keep reporting you guys back to chapter 38 in Job, lines 1 through 7, that's pre-rebellion. And you see that the sons of God were there at the foundations, from the beginning of the foundations of the world, until this iniquity basically takes place, and then line 8 goes into the sealing forward. And then you get into this business about loosing the bands of Orion and all that, everything we're speaking about. So you got to understand that during this great antiquitous past that the Anunnaki were here, even pre-rebellion, they had to leave the earth. The earth was still going through geologic upheavals. We were still going through minor cataclysms. We were still dealing with ice ages, and therefore they had to leave the planet. They had capabilities to leave the planet. And that's where these outposts are formed on Mars and certain moons, and even our moon, as you should all well know, basically because of the ruins that are being recorded there by our own space explorers and satellite imagery, plain and simple. Well, you will see that's exactly what's being recited here, that there are even ancient ruins in the time of this narrative that are up in these locations in the heavens. And he went up and down among the lions, became a young lion, and learned to catch the prey, and devoured men. And he knew their desolate palaces, and he laid waste their cities, and the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof by the noise of his roaring. Incredible. Now there's going to be an audio outage coming up in about 8 seconds. But that is going to describe this scene right here for you perfectly. Give me a few moments. I guess we ended up talking about this here briefly, but we're going to get back to this dating thing in the pyramids on this other plaque. Something's going to come up, and it's going to help us put this into the time perspective too when this is happening. Because you're going to see it's all hinging around this understanding of what this 70 generations period for their sealing is, and then when the sealing takes place. And then we can correctly date the garden period of temptation from that point, and then we can correctly date the period that they've been bound, and then in essence understand the timing for them being loosed. All right. And then when we do this, we're going to figure out this time thing that keeps on coming into play with some people that promote this Saturn propaganda incessantly, and then link it with time, and then link it in a sense with some sort of harvest. And we're going to see this root come down to agriculture that will link us right on back to megalithic people and these stone calendars such as Stonehenge. It's going to be so important. It's going to really demystify this Saturn thing, and then get you to really realize what harvest this thing is all about in perspective of the real understanding of this timing, and that's the sealing period. That's what they're obsessed with. And then the timing now becomes relative with the harvest of the parable of the wheat, the tares, just as Jesus Christ has declared. That's the real harvest that they're obsessed with this timing. It's not agricultural periods that were then handed down to the kingdoms of men, such as Enoch being some sort of quasi-emissary and then receiver of that knowledge so that he could survive some sort of cometary impact. Well, however, some of this information for survival on the scale of men might be true as they receive this knowledge. Nonetheless, the knowledge at its root form and its intent of system, as I said, was to circumnavigate the sealing and the judgment, to find a way to overthrow it, to find a way to transmutate themselves over, under, or around it, and they failed. And just as we see that it declares here in chapter 18, behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. But if a man be just and do that which is lawful and right, and hath not eaten upon the mountains. The entire chapter 18, right before this chapter 19 with the lions being taught to hunt, it's all about this mighty spirit proclaiming all souls are his. It's incredible. And then we see here in chapter 19, we see that these particular symbolized great and mighty men being symbolized as lions, becoming lions, going up and down amongst them. They're being taught to destroy and kill them. Well, my friends, if you're following me, you are seeing deep into this sophistry of the mystery of history, deep into it. But hopefully you're beginning to understand. And as this plaque will help you do, this is one of those generational descendancies of great and mighty hunters. Right there. One of those lions, who's in turn being taught to go up and down amongst these other lions. And if he's going up and down amongst these other lions, those lions would have flight, would they not? And he went up and down among the lions and became a young lion and learned to catch the prey and devoured men. Yep, he learned to catch the prey. He learned. There's the prey. And then devoured men. This is stylized. You take away the stylization here. This is a depiction of an ancient mighty man that had the power of flight, that took refuge on high locations. And then, in a sense, these Nephilim descendancies were excited against each other. And then they mutually slaughtered each other. Now, we're going to be able to prove this line of thought that I got here. And it's amazing that we've got some tangible archaeological evidence to do it. Give me a second, friends. We're going to come back here. But let's just show you here in the book of Enoch. We get this thing about what Azazel's done, what the Watchers have done. Okay? You can read that for yourself. Alright, I'm going to read here chapter 13, or verse 13 of chapter 10. To Gabriel also the Lord said, go to the biters, to the reprobates, to the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, the offspring of the watchers, from among men. Doesn't say destroy them entirely, and that's not what Gabriel did. He didn't destroy them. He destroyed their ability to be among men. That's the seal. Bring them forth and excite them one against another. These are the Nephilim descendancies. Nephilim descendancies are being excited one against another. Let them perish by mutual slaughter, for length of days shall not be theirs. They shall all entreat thee, but their fathers shall not obtain their wishes respecting them, for they shall hope for eternal life, that they may live each of them 500 years. Now this would be where the Sumerian epic, the story of Gilgamesh, comes into play, because Gilgamesh is one of these Nephilim hero kings who finds out that he might not be immortal due to his mortal heritage on his father's side and his supposed divine heritage on his mother's side, 2/3. Well, this is basically the same narrative here in the book of Enoch, describing their plight as they find these things out. Well, you know what Gilgamesh does? He eventually goes to the cedars of Lebanon, which we see talked about here in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 17. That great eagle is also leaving from Lebanon, going to a high place. It's all the same things, my friends. So let us now see this situation comes down to a sealing period of 70 generations underneath the earth. And that's what you would see here. 70 generations. And now as we see the location, we get it is opening the desert, which is in the Duodwell. Cast him in there. And I'm saying that's northern Africa. And then I'm saying the hurled and pointed stones are going to be relative to what you see there is hurled and pointed stones right there in the desert of northern Africa, known as the Giza necropolis, the city of the dead. And it would make sense because these beings, in consideration for the path, the pact, the oath that they have chosen, in essence have taken death unto themselves willingly. And all those that follow after them do the very same. So my point, I think, that you should really see here is that we've got almost a break in Nephilim faction descendancies. And then it's being declared that the very Nephilims themselves would destroy each other. Now you have to pair that with what you read now in Genesis about the mark of Cain. And then those that would also destroy them. And then in essence, this is where that red and that blue are going to come from. They're both representative of Nephilim descendancies. Both. You ever heard the expression, two bulls in a pen? Two bulls in a pen. Remember, the bulls are in reference to Anunnaki gods. And we got this curious red bull, and then we got people calling themselves this curious blue bull. And then you get two bulls in a pen. Don't think about a pen like a gate. Think about a pen like a writing pen. And that's where I've told you guys that the Bible is double. But in this fractured sense, in their minds, it's doubled upon two Nephilim descendancies. No, it's not doubled in that sense whatsoever. We've got one portion of the Nephilim descendancies that's being held in the water, the living water word of Jesus Christ, known as the seal. That's the Holy Ghost. That would represent the blue, most certainly. And then we've got, of course, those with the living blood, where the sword stays upon the blade, so to say. That would be those amongst the living, would it not? That would be the red. But that's a hyper fractal of breakdowns. Let's try to keep this thing a lot more simple here. My point is that the Nephilim are destroying each other. And then what is the great excitation that we see that brings them by this mutual slaughter one against another? It's genetics. It's genetic heritage, pride, and descendancies. Exactly right. Exactly right. Genetics. Pride. And then the whole thing develops from there. The whole race pride agenda, the whole monarchy, aristocracy, better than thou, who was born of who, son of that, mother of this, blah, blah, blah. Can't you see? Okay. So the 70 generation period, we figured out how long that was. It's about 37,000 years. Like I said, a little under 40,000 years. This has to go back to that point. And then as you see, it is. And then it says for that long that they would be held there. So from this point now, if we see this as the end times and the things that are taking place and setting up to take place, we could successfully go back at about 36, 37,000 years ago and date these sequences from Enoch, from Eden, and at the same time for the what's on the surface of the pyramids and the Giza necropolis, because it's those hurled and pointed stones that are being quoted here in the book of Enoch that is relative to this period of time here. 70 generations. It's going to be times 72, and we're going to show you how we got to that. So I'm showing you all this so that we can look at this Egyptian plaque here a little bit better. Now, this would be your information about Cain, chapter 4. Notice that Cain is making an agricultural offering. All right? And then you've got to think about this connection with Saturn being an agricultural god. And then you got to remember the words of Jesus Christ in the New Testament, talking to Peter, says that Satan is seeking to sift the wheat. In essence, it's Satan who first seeks to sift the wheat, in the essence of the parable on the wheat and the tares that Jesus Christ is describing in chapter 13 of the book of Matthew. Pretty sure it's chapter 13. Okay? It's very important because you're going to see that Jesus Christ knows exactly what he's talking about. Exactly. In relative fashion to the entire history of the Bible, the entire history of the book of Enoch, the entire history of the sealing period of these beings, in essence, who is being sealed and what they are being symbolized in connection to, of their default, of their fall to this doctrine of Satan. And then we see this timing period, this agricultural harvest scenario develops, but yet they only try to flash it to you on its lowest level. And then you'll see this being displayed archaeologically when they research these megalithic communities, peoples known as the Groove Ware, that you would find in the British Isles that are connected to those hinges in mounds. All right, people that are associated with names like Druids and what have you, Celtics and what have you. All of this is going to be relative to people that had a calendrical understanding. But at the same time, the archaeologist puts the perspective of their calendrical understanding on the premise of just needing to know this to restart crops agriculturally. And then they've tried to put this into perspective of some sort of great cataclysm that they were aware of, that this special group of descendants would be aware of, and that because they had that knowledge, they would live. All right, and then the book of Enoch, through some people's eyes, would be seen as an attempt for these high people that were being seen as gods in their mind to try to save some of the common peoples they were in contact with. Enoch would represent that to them, and then they give this astronomical knowledge to Enoch so that hopefully they could restart the calendrical systems to try to find out the best time to replant their crops after a cataclysm, because generally a lot of people would die. Well, I'm telling you that's not what it's all about. Okay, that's where the archaeological system fails. That's where they tone down the essence of the material. That's where they don't link up the scriptures from the Bible, from the book of Enoch, the 70 generations period being in essence a sealing period that can relate to about 40,000 years, which is a prominent generational time period in the Old Testament with Israel itself. And then we see that number links back up to Enki. It is Enki's number, the Nahesh, bringing us back up to Satan, the serpent, and then it brings us back up to that supposed agricultural god. Now, what is the serpent in essence symbolized offering? Well, he'd be offering an apple, would he not? Well, he would be offering agriculture. Exactly right. So it's the very same thing. So if you research this archaeologically, when you start to look at the descendancies of Cain, they begin to spread themselves out into the British Isles and other places and build these stone structures and these hinges and mounds and what have you that are built atop over and over again by whatever culture comes in contact with them after them. Well, the real essence for these people to build these things was not to be able to plant crops. It was to track the processional cycle, in which was to track the seal, which was in essence to keep a calendrical pace with the great work that was required for the generational descendancies of Elites that were born from these Nephilims that were become the ruling aristocracies of men known as the Illuminati that would do the great work through this time period so that the work that was done by the Nephilim before them with this Enochian magic knowledge would not be in vain. And that was to break the seal, to win their freedom, in essence, to gain dominion over our world, and then at the same time grant the 1,000-year millennium kingdom to the Israelite stead that carried out this great work. And we know who these supposed Israelites are. They're mixed amongst the nations, and they are among many nations. And they are more or less joined ideologically now, not so much ethnically or racially. As you should understand, they're more or less unified by the mystery religious concept itself and the great work and the great labor of that concept to birth this new world order, which we all know by now is really steeped in the business of birthing the fallen prince into a material form, whether their lower initiates know it or not. So, guys, this agricultural thing with Saturn and timing and all that is relative to this 70 generational time period, and that's going to be relative to these pyramids and these stones that were symbolized at marking that place where these beings were kept. Okay, so this is the biblical merit here, and I'm sorry if I rambled on. I hope that I put that into a perspective to where at this point you should be able to understand. Okay, so we know what happens. Cain slays his brother Abel. And then basically we find out that he's going to be driven out this day from the face of the earth. And that's very important because you understand that the Nephilim were also driven out from the face of the earth, right? And then we see that the generations that live from them, it says everyone that would find them would slay them. And then that's where we saw that mutual slaughter from the book of Enoch that would take place from these descendancies against each other. It's right there. All right. So as it goes on down, now Cain goes to the land of Nod. Well, this is important because guess what? This means there was people on earth way before Adam and Eve. Way before Adam and Eve. Almost 1 million years before Adam and Eve. That's right. Mankind evolved on this planet. And when you want to talk Adam and Eve, you need to start talking about them in 3 different perspectives and in 3 different time scales, and then in all actuality 3 separate groups of Adam and Eves. No doubt. You've got the original Adam and Eve that everybody thinks of as being the first humans in this world. Well, you would have to start thinking about dust, because that becomes the first Adam, in which of course Eve does evolve out of. And as we see from a single-celled organism all the way through to what we've got now, representing the dominance of his conditional environment, the pinnacle of it, man. And that was, in essence, the image of God, which had the power to love, show forth mercy, to be compassionate, to recognize truth, beauty, and goodness, and to hold these concepts dear. That is what being in the image of God truly is. So we are at that pinnacle now of the likeness and the imagery of God, as long as we show forth those virtues. And I tell you, I'll be the first to admit that it's difficult to do on a 24-hour scale, but nonetheless, that's why we're not perfect. And we go through all this to get perfect. So we see that now Cain goes to this land of Nod. Land of Nod is going to bring us back to a name Don, which links us back up to the Don Keys, the donkeys that we linked up with the movie Shrek. It's going to be very important because it links us up to certain And then we want to link these fairy folk up to the fairy mounds. And if we link the fairy folk up to the fairy mounds, it's not too much of a leap to go back to the daughters of men, of which they thought were fair in Genesis 6. And then we find out that what these fairies really are all about. And these fairy mounds, as I'm telling you, it's to track this sealing period, in essence, to gauge the labor of the great work through these ages. All right, and to know what stage of the great work that they're in. All right, and of course for practical reasons as well. So now we get Enoch is born, all right, of this union between Cain and this very mysterious woman found in this land of Nod. That right there proves there's people on earth. At least 3 more people, considering she's got to have mother and father over there. And then those mother and father got to have mothers and fathers somewhere. And then their mother, see what I'm saying? It's a whole huge population of people on the earth at this time. Read the Urantia book. Nonetheless, as we move forward, let us come to what is very important. And that's just simply going to be verse 24. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Now, we've talked about this before. All right? This is what you are reading when you see this in the book of Enoch, which is all about who is being sealed. And it's that 70 generations period. So it says, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Now, when I first started looking at this maybe a few years ago now, I was very intrigued, and I knew that it related to the 70 generations of the book of Enoch, and I figured out what it was all about. And you could find out, if you would like, watching the video series I did. The start date for the Garden of Eden is 36,288 BC. Or you could just wait here and give me a few moments, and I'll summarize that information right here in this video. My point is that a lot of people, and I will admit, it's confusing, but let's take away all confusion right here so you know exactly what's being said. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Well, we find out that Lamech is a murderer, and then Cain is a murderer. We see that these 2 murderers are being avenged, not meaning that they're being punished for being murderers. No, in the Bible, it's saying right here that they are going to be avenged, meaning vengeance is going to be taken on their behalf on a great population of other peoples. How could that be so? Well, it is so because we know the Bible's double. Ain't no doubt about it. And I've told you that, and you have to understand about the trickery, the fudgery, at least I say fuckery, that has taken place in this book. It's double. That's why you trust in the words of Jesus Christ. And if you trust in his words and you can understand his parable as he speaks them, his parable explains the truth of the Old Testament as it is showing me and has shown me the correct way to interpret this history and to reveal this mystery as best as I'm able. So for the proof of how I'm telling you right here that there's going to be some particular vengeance at this 77-fold period, and I needed to know what it was. Well, it was easy to find out. It was in Revelation. Had everything to do with that fire that comes from the sky. But to guarantee you that I'm interpreting this correctly, listen to line 15. And the Lord said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. No doubt that I'm not exactly right with what I just told you. There is no doubt. Whoever slays Cain, vengeance is going to be taken on him sevenfold. So as I said, the vengeance is on Lamech's and Cain's behalf at the end of this period. These murderers are going to be avenged. And then you see Jesus Christ in John, I can't remember what chapter it is. It could be chapter 10, verse 44, but it's just conveniently enough, verse 44, where he describes their father, the murderer. The murderer. And as it begins to fully develop in your mind from line by line, here a little, there a little, precept upon precept, precept upon precept. I hope that you're beginning to put this together. I do. I really do. So now, very important, we get the beginning descendancy here of some sort of Nephilim union. Whether you think that Cain is a portion of a Nephilim union or not at this point is really of no concern to me. You could at least see that Enoch is by at least Cain taking this Nodite wife. And that's exactly what happens. But you should, if you watch my earlier videos, know who Cain is. Cain is considered that wicked seed. Cain can't be Adam's son. Cain cannot be Adam's son if he's considered a wicked seed. He's somebody else's seed. And that's a big portion of the mystery of the fruit that Eve takes, symbolized as this tree that was pleasant to the eyes. Then you got to remember what we see in Daniel with these Nephilim being depicted as trees. See what I'm saying? Layer over layer over layer. All right, guys. So now you get this connection with the descendancy of Cain being connected to megalithic city builders. Okay, metallurgy, what have you. Basically, all you have to do is just simply read it. Agriculture, animal husbandry, all the very same things that you get supposedly the Anunnaki had given to man in civilization. All right, but we're going to be able to connect this descendancy a little better here, but at this point you should be seeing the connection there. And we need to know now what this 70 times sevenfold is all about. All right? We need to know. And then if we can see intrinsically that the building of the pyramids, at least what we see above ground, is connected to that 70 generations via the book of Enoch, well, then that is going to be what this plaque does for us. And if you have followed me up to this point, this is what we're going to start to look at. Take a good look at that image. It's an image of the Giza Plateau, the 3 pyramids and the Sphinx, like you have never seen before in your entire life. Look at all the flora and the fauna. And dare I say, water. All over the place. Flowing water in and around, completely inundating the pyramid complex. How important could that be? How important could that be for some of my, I guess people would call them theories, for some of my personal theories about the dating of the Egyptian civilization in connection with the temptation event at the Garden of Eden? It would be very important. We're gonna see some very tangible evidence here that will support what I have translated here and how I've translated it, how I've seen it, and the dating and the timing that I've done for it. And it will be relative here, because you got to remember these lions in essence going up and down are in those chapters between 17 and 23 of the book of Ezekiel, which is so highly relative to what we're talking about here. Incredible. Okay, let's get down to business here. I'm going to talk about this one right here exclusively. If you look at this center event here, the center record, because it's really an inscription, an iconographic event that has been recorded, some sort of historical importance. Well, in my opinion, what we're looking at is a depiction of when the Anunnaki had first came to the first regions of this world that had been receded enough by the ice at about the 450,000 year marker, and that event is being recorded in the Egyptian style as they look back at that portion of history that they had somehow had literary contact with. Somehow they had some sort of historical record of that event from another previous culture before them that had handed it down. Back to that scenario that was going on in the media not so long ago about the duck dynasty. There's all the ducks, right? There's a duck hunter, right? Okay? We're not going to talk about this now, but you want to find out what the hoopla was all about? It's about this right here. What were Egyptian ages of particular rule called? They were called dynasties. They were referred to as individual dynasties, fourth dynasty, and so forth. Okay? What was that mess scenario called on the TV with the media? Something going on with the duck dynasties, right? There's your duck dynasty right there. You think it has a connection? It does. It does. But what I want you to see here, at least, is that we're seeing like a marsh-like world, a marsh-like land. Now, don't confuse me here that this is happening at about the 450,000 year marker. This is not happening at the 450,000 year marker. But yet we're seeing, in essence, two separate great ice ages and the repercussion of their receding. And then, as a result, the melting off of that ice that is now inundating the land. It's covering the land. All right, you got to think about the Nile Valley. It's got a great river that runs through it, right? And it's supposed to be so fertile around that whole river, that whole valley plain. Well, why would it be? Well, because it's been continually overrun, completely flooded that region out, as you're seeing now, at least high enough to get to the top of the plateau known as the Giza Plateau, somewhere in the past. But this ice age is not, the receding of this ice age is not taking place at the 450,000 year marker like what this scene is depicting. This one is taking place, in my opinion, at around the 11,000, 14,000 BC marker. That's what this scene is recording. Very important. For some of you who have studied the erosion on the Sphinx, the vertical and the parallel fissures that are undoubtedly connected to massive amounts of water. Some people would refer the vertical fissures to rain, and a period of rain that took place in the Nile Valley at around the 7,000 year marker. But the erosion, the parallel fissures with the ground would not be consistent. That would be consistent with water that would be running parallel with the ground, like what you see here depicted in this imagery. So in other words, my friends, most people would say that the pyramids, if you would follow the contemporary Egyptologists, they say that they were built at around or during the reign of Khefru, okay, and in essence as tombs, right? Well, we know that that's just a bunch of hogwash to keep the most feeble-minded of people at bay from ever understanding the truth of these matters. So then you go back to some of the fringe researchers, for lack of a better term, actually some very credible researchers. And if I'm not mistaken, it would be Robert Bauval proved without a doubt that the pyramids are aligned, the three pyramids, the chief principal structures in the Giza complex are aligned to the bands, the belt stars of Orion. And then we see that the Sphinx is aligned to its own celestial contemporary, Leo, and its sort of equinoctial gaze, if you will. Well, we see that this perfect key mirroring alignment takes place, at least one of them, at the 10,500 year marker. Well, then, logically, a lot of people jumped on that as being the timing for the building of these pyramids. Now, where I'm going with this is that Enoch is already telling us the timing, because it has to have everything to do with that 70 generation. And then that's when we see those stones are being thrown, the hurled stones, in this desert called the Duatouel in northern Africa. To the best of my research, that's where it is. And then as we see as we see here, give me a second, guys, if you're following this. Don't take what I'm showing you here lightly. I'm going to show you some more things with it. And as we see here, it's clarified as Egypt, guys. And the nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains unto the land of Egypt. Now I'm telling you, the chains that he's literally being brought in is the seal that's associated with the tetrahedron. That you're seeing right here is the two X's associated with sacred feminine, but it's also associated with chain link. Okay, but as I'm saying, it's truly the seal, the power of the seal that is in holding them. And then in essence, they're in holding them in this Egypt location. Well, that's what we're all talking about, okay? So we know that the place is Egypt that Enoch is talking about now, in my opinion. So if this gives us this 70 generations period, and I have dated this back now at the 36,288 BC marker, then we're going to find support. We're going to find that I've got some incredible, tangible, archaeological support. Because if this is a reproduction, it's a reproduction of an original. This is some original iconography somewhere that is going to depict this scene, and I would love to see it. What this is telling us, people, if you have, let's see if I can provide a chart. Okay, this is a chart from the video series Conspiracy Concerning the Dwarf Star, and there absolutely is, nonetheless. Okay, this would put the zodiacal ages in place in the particular year that they occupy. As we come on down to the 10,000 BC period and going further back, we see that Leo is occupying the equinoctial house of the sun. Okay? And then this is where the 10,500 BC alignment takes place in perfect reflection for the constellation in the sky to match the orientation for the monuments on the ground. 10,500. And that's where a lot of people say, okay, well then they must have logically been built there. Well, that's not what this is saying. Without a doubt, that's not what this is saying. And you have to realize that we've got a receding of a great ice age that is taking place basically further back from this period here. From about 14,000 to 11,000 BC, we get a great receding of this ice age, which means before that time, this whole area is covered in ice. The whole area is completely inhospitable. And what in essence is being said here, in my opinion, at the 10,500 marker, there really wouldn't have been enough time to plan and to build in that one little small window and then abandon it again. All right. So what this is telling us is that these pyramids are already in place during this great inundation of water, which was the receding of the Great Ice Age. And then between 11,000 and 14,000 BC, this water has flooded the Nile Valley, has reached the top of the plateau complex, and severely inundated this land and caused the parallel fissure erosion consistent with running water to the ground, not just the vertical fissures of rain that they're looking to at the 7,000 year marker. It wasn't enough water to do all that damage. This is the water that we're looking for. So it proves that the pyramids and the Sphinx, in my opinion, don't have to take my word on it, but you should look at the information a little more seriously, especially with just the dating that we've shown with Enoch, and then the dating to get us to this 36,000 year period. And if that would be true, then absolutely, yes, the pyramids and the Sphinx would have gone through the melting of the Great Ice Age, and all of this water would have inundated them, exactly as we see here. Look at the water-loving flowers here. And there's even more underneath this nomadic wanderer that we see here on a camel. And I emphasize nomad, wanderer, and symbolism of the camel. Canaanites, Phoenicians, if you will. Notice the water-loving plants are under here, but the artist just didn't take time to hand paint them. The plants continue even all the way around. It's almost like a forest that has grown up around the pyramids themselves. And dare I say that these are masts of sailing ships. And that's what I'm going to say. In my opinion, that's exactly what they're trying to convey. Incredible. Would you see a UFO right there? Flying saucer cruising by? I don't know. I'm not even going to go there. But where I am going to go is that these are water loving plants. The whole area is covered by water. These look to be sailing ships, and this is Egypt in a flora and fauna like we've never seen it. It's not just that this is some Nile region, the whole Nile water has overflowed the entire complex, which would be the proof for the contemporary erosion, at least the mystery. It would give us the solution to the mystery of the erosion that we find today around the Sphinx and the monuments themselves. And it is telling us that they were built before this inundation between 11 and 14,000 BC. Obviously, they weren't building them sludging around in the water. Well, then they had to be built before the Ice Age, the entirety of it, which, if I'm not mistaken, lasted, 10, 15,000 years, maybe a little longer? That puts us closer back to them having to be built when, as I said, at about the 35,000, 38,000 year marker, which would be consistent with what the Book of Enoch says. It's consistent with what is being shown to you in some sort of stylized observer's view of whatever person of Egyptian descent recorded this information. Incredible. So, how does that work out perfectly with what in some of the things we've already talked about here? Well, this would be my version of a world age clock. Okay, here's where we are right now, basically coming up to this alignment. There's where we got the dark rift, the cosmic womb. This is that dark band of sky called the Milky Way, lit up with all the stars right there in the center. They call that the dark rift or the serpent's mouth. This means a lot of things. They also call it the womb, in association with the woman in travail. It's what these alignments are lining up to. It's what the biblical reference and what Jesus Christ is even talking about in the entire scenario of the coming to the fruition, the consummation of their crimes coming to a full. Well, when you consummate a marriage, is that something where you basically have sex on the honeymoon night, right? To my understanding, when you just get married, if this is a fantastic wedding, well, they're supposed to go to the honeymoon, right? Well, somebody else likes honey. They might be going to the moon, I heard. I don't know. But nonetheless, this will be the world age scenario. This basically is going to be that 70 generations right here. Okay? This is taking us from Aries into Pisces, the close of Pisces going into Aquarius. And what we should understand here is we've got at about 5,040 years for this period of time from the Mayan point of view, or from the Hebrew point of view. And then from the Mayan point of view, it's about 5,125. So if we bring this back to the 10,500 year marker for the alignment of Leo, in which it does take place at 10,500 BC, perfect alignment. And they say naturally, okay, well, they must have been built then. Well, no, not naturally. They couldn't have been built then. For a lot of reasons, the erosion will tell you. And then this is the mystery of the erosion. They were there during the receding of the ice ages. They suffered that inundation of all that water for all of those thousands of years. The parallel fissures to the ground on the Sphinx will prove that. It's not just vertical fissures from rain coming from above. It's parallel. It's water running around, as you see recorded here in this picture. Notice that it's even the stylized cross-hatching of water like you would have done when you were in school as a child to depict water. Okay, so my point is that if we take this period of roughly 5,125, two of them close to about the 10,500 year marker, right? Two of these. Well, to make the alignment correct and to give us the next, using already their train of thought, already what Mr. Baval has found with the alignment and correlation with the pyramids being aligned to Orion and Leo, and the perfect alignment is 10,500. That line of thinking is right. But because we know the inundation of water and they're seen being shown existing through that, they must have been built before that. The next logical thing to do is to rewind the precessional clock around one full turn, 26,000 years, and we'll come up to the exact same alignment and mirror of Leo and Orion. That's the key. And then we're far enough back to escape the ice from that large ice age. The land would have been cleared, and it would have been, in essence, a different temperate region that would have been more hospitable to do that type of work. And of course, we will now better understand who was first doing that work there, which is important. So if we bring it back, one second. If we bring it back, guys, we're at the 10,500 year marker here. That's what they're saying. And then we're seeing the archaeological evidence is saying no, much earlier. Book of Enoch, much earlier. What you can glean from Genesis, much earlier. And we've got the Ice Age to counter. So then it fits perfectly at about what? 10,500. Rewind the precessional clock to get the perfect mirror, the very same mirror they see here. That's one full round of the precessional clock, roughly 26,000 years. 26,000 plus 10,500 is 36,500. Perfectly. Perfect correlation, guys, for my 36,288 BC dating of the temptation point of the Garden of Eden event. Perfect. Perfect. Now, unfortunately, the video is super long here. And let me just see if I can just quickly close this out and bring you back to what you see here to make some sense of it. This is timing a coming judgment by these descendants of Cain. And we're going to see this in association with even a Cain in a top hat. And we're going to see this connection to Saturn. We're going to see this connection come up big time, and you're going to understand some things, some psyopses they're trying to run on the people now. Remember, if I'm not mistaken, Beyonce's Super Bowl appearance with the Cain situation. Remember the movie Usual Suspects? Kevin Spacey played a character, Kaiser Sose, with that limp in the cane. I'm telling you guys, flip of the switch. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Well, what is the 70 first? Because then that 70 is obviously times sevenfold. That was the key, was to figure out what 70 was. And for me, I was guided through all this by the Spirit. Jesus Christ guided me to figure all this out. And you could probably see that when you even review my videos, I'm almost speaking about things that I really still don't even understand in their fullness. But it is being given to me in such a way to where I can give and then freely give it back. And even another year and a half, 2 years later now, I really understand what I've been given and what I'm trying to give you. And it comes full circle. It really does. So the key was to figure out what this 70 generations was so that we can times it sevenfold and see what the key was. Well, I had known enough about precession at that time to to know about a number 72. In fact, I'm born in 1972, and I know about that number in other ways that's consistent with something about me. But let me just go ahead and read this right here from the book Heaven's Mirror by Graham. I commend the writer of the book for incredible research, incredible knowledge, incredible perspective of writing, not just putting the information out there. The way that the information is presented is awesome. It's a thrilling book, it's an adventurous book, it's a wonderful book, but you know, it just might not. It just might not see the fullness there, at least in perspective when it comes to Jesus Christ. You know, but nonetheless, let's go ahead and read here, and you're going to hear a pretty well defined description of procession. What makes us suspect a message, or at any rate some attempt at communication, is the peculiar fact that the number 43,200 is not random, but one of a series that is generated mathematically by the precession of the axis of the Earth. We have already shown in chapter 2 that this slow cyclical wobble displaces the positions of all stars at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years, and thus by 360 degrees in 25,920 years. And that's what I was showing you here. This world age clock is that 26,000 year full processional round of all 12 signs of the zodiac as they each house the sun for about 2,000 years roughly in this processional period. So it says that this slow cyclical wobble displaces the positions of all stars at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years, and thus by 360 degrees in 25,920 year period. The best known effect is the apparent gradual rotation of the 12 constellations of the zodiac in relation to the rising point of the sun on the spring equinox, allowing each constellation to house the sun on that special day for a period of 2,160 years. The heartbeat of the mechanism is the number 72, the number of years required for 1 degree of precession. 600 such heartbeats amounts to 43,200, the figure used in the pyramid Earth ratio. So we basically just took a step into a chunk of information here, and I want you to see what's relative for what we're looking at is this number 72. All right, we see that 72 in relationship to 360 gives us 25,920. Well, that's exactly what I found. When I was looking for the answer to that, that is how I began. And then once I realized that this was very close to the great year cycle of all 12 zodiacs continuing through their cycle in the equinoctial sun house cycle, then I knew that if I could get close from this 5040 Hebrew world age, as I times them times 5 to this 25,920 mathematically perfect, then I knew that I had the Hebrew, I knew I had the start for a Hebrew world age. And then how did I start finding a Hebrew world age? Well, that's what we saw in Genesis. Since Genesis gave us this number of 70, I had to figure out what 70 was. I knew what sevenfold was. It was going to be times that 70, but we were missing something in 70. Well, because the equation for 360 was 72, gave us the perfect great year cycle. And I already knew that the Hebrew had some sort of theological apprehension of world age, because they were dealing with serpent cycles. They were dealing with ages of serpent destruction and then renewal of that destruction, just like the Mayans saw in their world age scenario. So I knew that the Hebrews had a world age philosophy. Matter of fact, they were displaying it in Genesis right here in chapter 4. So what I did was I took this number 72 and I times it simply the 70 generations in verse 24. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 in sevenfold. So I took 72 times 70, and that gave me 5,040. Well, then I was like, bingo, because I knew what the Mayan world age was. It was 5,125. So the next thing I did was I took 5 of these, because that's how many world ages you're supposed to have that make up the great year cycle of about 26,000 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then I was looking for an equal division. So when I divided it 5, I came up to 25,200 at the Hebrew. So if 72 times 70 was 5,040, then I tried to times that times 5 gave me 25,200. Well, that wasn't enough. Hopefully I'm not losing y'all guys here. That wasn't enough. Okay, it was close. It was close enough to the mathematical perfect of 360 to know that I was on track. And since, as I said, they had serpent destruction beginning and ending in their ages, just like the Mayans, and I was basically a little less than some change here from the Mayan, I knew I was on the right track. I knew I was on the right track. So then I went ahead and equivalated the world ages times 5 for the Mayan, and it got me closer. I got to 25,625. So then I got it over here times 5, 25,200. I basically was straddling these two cultures' world age apprehension against the mathematical perfect of 72 times 360. So then what I did is I dropped the two that weren't obviously close, and I just simply divided by 5 the 25,920, which gave me the better 5,184 world age, which I believe both of these were alluding to. But yet we had lost something, and the comprehension that I figured out that we lost was the 13th constellation. But nonetheless, as I did, then I could take that number and times it sevenfold. And when I did, it gave me 36,288 BC. Boom. Now that was tough for me to explain, and especially at the end of a unedited hour and 18-minute long video. Come on. I don't know about you guys, but the concepts that I'm talking about and things that I'm saying are definitely up there for my intellectual capability. So I hope that you do bear with me in the way that I do my best to convey this information. Okay, I'm sorry that if you don't understand it, but I'm hoping that you do. And if you've been following the video series that I'm mentioning that some of these videos are from, you should understand this very well now. And if you don't, all you have to do is pause this and then copy it down, and then go over the scriptures that I showed you and go over the math that I've showed you here, and you'll see that I'm on point, regardless of my ability to explain it in such a way where I can sum it up in 10 minutes. I was trying to give you a lot of everything at once, because it is everything at once. So this will support what the book of Enoch is saying about the structures in Egypt that we see, at least associated with the Sphinx and those 3 pyramids, are involved in the sealing of these fallen beings, at least the safeguarding, the safe and sound of their residual souls, the remnant of their being. And it's going to be right there. It's going to be right there. There's your 70 generations. Now you know what 70 generations is from a Mayan perspective. Is times I mean, from a Hebrew perspective, it's times 72, which gives us 5,040. When I saw that, I already knew what the Mayan was, and I was like, bingo, you know, I knew I had it. I knew I had it. And then I just took the breakdown from there. And just took the breakdown. So then if you can see that the pyramids are linked up with this procession, and then the number 72, okay, now that's an epiphany, right? I haven't thought about trying to put it in that perspective. So if it's all about even the number 72, well, it would only be natural to take that number 72 if that's what they're speaking about in the Bible, right? In the Hebrew Bible, are they not speaking about Egypt in these pyramids? I'm dragging on here. This video is almost over. Chains unto the land of Egypt. Where do you think in Egypt they were bringing him? Where? And then now you know the great antiquity of all this. The great antiquity. So, guys, when I come back, we'll talk about the other two plaques and monuments, the Aryan ones, which is going to open up more from the book of Ezekiel. And we're going to get into this Shen ring here. And it's the same Shen rings you're seeing right there, right? It's the same thing right here, guys. Okay. One more moment. See this guy looking like an eagle, right? With the Shen ring. See this eagle with the Shen ring? A little scepter there. Notice even what direction he's looking to. What colors we see. The eagle, the phoenix. I'm telling you. Look at the little cylindrical object, the scepter. Right there with it all, guys. These celestial objects in the sky, what does that mean? Well, I've got some pretty interesting theories, I guess. I'll be back.